Welcome to A Time to Thrill, episode 19. This month, we're featuring USA Today bestselling author Brenna Aubrey. I'm super excited to share this with you. So, Brenna Aubrey, oh my God, I met her. I'm so bad at this. Let's just say somewhere in the 5 to 10 years ago range. Probably like 6 or 7. That sounds about right. Maybe longer, COVID, man. But Brenna is this blockbuster selling author of a series called At Any Price. And it was such a huge sensation. I can't even tell you. She was there. I don't know how far at the beginning of the indie game. Maybe this book, I'll have to look it up, At Any Price. Maybe it was like 2014, 2015. That sounds about right. And which means now I've known her closer to the 10-year range. And it's a book, it's a book about a girl, Mia, who decides to auction off her virginity to pay for college. I think it was a long time ago I read the book. And the guy who wins the auction is a guy named Adam. It's Adam and Mia. They have a 3-book arc. I read it. And this book flew off the virtual shelves in a way that you can't believe. And I think Brenna may talk about this in the podcast, but I remember sitting next to her somewhere, some writers meeting or gathering, and she kept refreshing Kindle, and it was just like thousands and thousands of sales. And it was just, it was having a front seat to that kind of phenomenon is amazing to watch. And she got a whole bunch of press. A lot of influential bloggers talked about her and the book and the origins of the book. And it was one of the most interesting things I think I've ever seen in my human life. And, you rarely see, and she's not an overnight sensation. I don't want to say that because she has written and published before this, but it's that same sort of sense where you meet people and they're an overnight sensation. And obviously they've worked hard before they became an overnight sensation. I mean, she had to write the book. She wrote a book before. She's existed in the romance space, but it was sort of an amazing thing to watch and to witness. And one of the things that is interesting is a maturing of that kind of thing. So, she wrote those 3 books and then some subsequent books, and we'll talk about this during the podcast. Sort of maintaining momentum when you shoot up like a star is its own thing. I mean, I know people on both sides of this thing. Either they start out like gangbusters and you have to maintain that momentum, and that's like a lot of not only work, but like psychic and emotional energy. And then people who start out small and get big and also still then have to sort of cope with that. And it's a really interesting place to be dealing with massive success. But I think it'll be an interesting talk because we rarely sort of delve into what that's like in a lot of people's careers. And I've lived here 20 years. So I've known people like pre-stardom and post. And I'm going to be honest, the people don't change, but the circumstances around them change dramatically. And that is the interesting part. The other thing I do need to warn you about is that we were recording over the internet, and the call, it's not really a call, but it dropped off a couple of times. Somebody in her house was, sucking up the internet and didn't tell her. So, because that's how it rolls. So, there will be bridges where we go on and off, and they'll have musical interludes. So I just want to warn you in advance. Usually I don't have a break in any of my recordings, but there are in this. But it is such an interesting and fascinating interview, and I can't wait for you to hear everything that Brenna has to say. So without further ado, let's get to the interview. Ready, set, let's go. Hi, and welcome to Time to Thrill. This month I have the great pleasure of speaking with USA Today bestselling author Brenna Aubrey. How are you, Brenna?
I'm good, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
No, it's so great. Well, it's so great to talk to you. I was going to say, and I haven't seen you in a long time, but that applies to everyone. It's just weird that I haven't seen a lot of people in over a year.
I know, it's crazy, and it's weird though, as we are going out and about and as things are starting to open up, I start thinking of last year as 2019, and I
Exactly.
have to realize, no, it's actually almost 2 years ago, and it's kinda crazy. It's like we lost a year in there somewhere.
It's so true. So a friend of mine, actually, he just sent me a picture of his bicycle. He was biking somewhere and he was showing me actually the background. And I was like, "Oh, there's your new bike." And he's like, "I bought the bike in September of 2019." And I thought, "But I last saw him in August." So and so to me the bike is new and he's like, "I've had the bike nearly 2 years."
It's
And I
so
was
weird,
like,
isn't it? We're
"It
just in this
is.
weird time vortex now where we've lost this chunk
It
of
is."
time.
Because the exact last conversation I had with him in person was, "Oh, I'm so looking forward to seeing your new bike." And and then it was just it's I have a lot of awkward conversations where I have to pause and I'm like, "So you remember?" And it's a long time ago.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
I'll ask you first, how was the pandemic for you creatively? Some people, well, thrived. I'm not one of them, but other people not so much.
It was a weird experience. Those first couple months, I was kind of right there with everybody, kind of on doom scroll constantly. It was already going to be a bad year because it was election year, and I
Right.
usually try to tune out at least the early part of election year because I just don't, until
Want.
until the primaries, and all that. I don't want to go into politics, but I'm just saying. So I was kind of already expecting it, but then this happened, and for the first few months, I was just kind of that in that same mode. And then there's somewhere that I just said, I decided that for my own mental health, I just kind of need to disconnect,
Hmm.
and I just kind of, I guess I kind of did it a little subconsciously too. Is I just kind of ended up creating a little haven for myself here in my house and my backyard and whatnot. I started spending more time out there gardening and just kind of making a nice space. And then once I had this lovely space set up, it became so much easier to be able to sit down and go back to writing. And
Okay.
it's weird. It's because it's almost like I figured it out by accident that was the problem I was having because I'd been having some creative block issues before that.
Hmm.
And I think it was just the fact that I didn't have my own little space carved out to be able to just kind of a pretty space, some
Right.
place where I could just kind of feel good about myself. So I did a lot of decluttering and stuff at the earlier, I guess, because I felt like I needed to do something, like we all did, and
Right.
yet we're all stuck at home. So I was furiously decluttering, and in the process, I kind of created this nice space for myself, and it was easier to be able to get back into creating. So it ended up being a good year towards the end of 2020 and into 2021 as far as being able to get things done. I got a few books out, which I hadn't gotten out a book since 2018. So
Okay.
it was a good, it ended up being good for
That's
me.
good. Yeah, that's so great. So before that, did you? I feel like you had an office, but were you writing in the garage? No, you had some space that you were writing.
Right. I had
Um,
a rented office that I'd rented with another author.
that's
And
right.
as,
I remembered this
yes,
now. Sorry.
no worries. No worries.
I
Yes.
I
We were
remember
in
the
the
conversation.
office space together for a few years. But then once the pandemic hit and there were other issues with, obviously her not being able to make it out to I was much closer to the office than she
Right.
was, and so during the pandemic she didn't really feel comfortable going to that space, which I totally understand because of the
Hmm.
shared atmosphere there. And we were right next to a dance studio and they were still open for some crazy reason.
Wow.
I know, we were not happy about that, so we just decided to let it go. Besides, just the pandemic in and of itself, we just thought, okay, it's not a good thing, but it ended up being good because that kind of forced me to create a space here that I'd never had,
Hmm.
and it's actually working out a lot better for me.
That's great. I remember now the whole thing because she lives up here. And now I got it. So I'm sorry. I'm just
Mhm.
all the things I forget over the last year and a half. It's astounding
You know
because I
what?
remember having the conversation with you at some restaurant, but I
Yeah.
just now.
And you know what? There's absolutely, we all can claim pandemic brain, a lot has happened in the last year and yet not much has happened at the same time. It's just
Exactly.
been so weird.
So what okay, I have a lot of questions. So what did you release in the last year? Because I haven't so I'm gonna be frank. I haven't read fiction a lot recently. Just because it's not for some reason before the pandemic, fiction was an escape, but during the pandemic it didn't feel that way.
Mhm.
So I've been reading mostly nonfiction.
Oh, well,
Um
I totally get that. And also too, I mean, I don't know about you, but I have to do a lot of nonfiction reading just for research for my books. I find myself gravitating towards different subject matters just depending on the book I'm writing at the time.
Okay, I'll have to ask you about that because I do no research. So nothing. Anything that otherwise it's a job. So are you still okay? So in oh my god, 2020 because now it's 2021. Did you release more gaming the system books?
Yes, I did. I actually had not released a gaming the system book since 2017. I had taken a break to go work on another. Um, I released in 2017. I released the wedding book for my main couple, and then I'd
Adam and
also
Mia,
released
right? Yeah.
yeah, Adam and Mia, and then I also released the prequel that I'd been serializing for my newsletter subscribers.
Oh,
And
okay.
then I broke away and did started a new series called Point of No Return, and that was about a SpaceX type company, and then the heroes of that series are astronauts who fly for that SpaceX type company called X Venture. And so I wanted astronaut heroes, but I didn't necessarily want them to be working for NASA. So I kind of
Mhm.
wanted something newer, new and sexier. And SpaceX was in the news around the time that Elon Musk launched his Tesla into orbit, if you recall
Right.
that whole
Yes.
that story. I'd just been so fascinated with The Martian, and I kind of wanted to write like Mark Watney's love story, but obviously I could not write it Mark Watney. So I thought, okay, I'll do
Right.
my own astronaut. And anyway, so I broke away and did those two books, and that actually was very research intensive. And I think I also kind of was hitting some personal snags in my personal life and things. So I think my process slowed down a lot. It took me about a year and a half to get that out, and then
Mm.
after that I was having a lot of creative issues, and so by the time I got back, I mean, I immediately started the next game of the system book because a lot of people were really
Waiting
asking about
for it.
that book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a like a cliffhanger at the end of the wedding book for the next heroine. She gets stuck at the airport in immigration because she's Canadian. She's working in the country illegally, and
Mhm.
she's caught by immigration, and that's the cliffy. Everyone was dying to find out what happens to this character,
Right.
and so I had to kept my readers waiting for like 3 years, and so I was really feeling the pressure. I didn't get a book out in 2019 at all,
Mhm.
and so 2020 came, and then I hit that kind of creative rejuvenation there towards the summer, about this time last year, and I was able to kind of wrap that book up, but it was a long book. And then right after that, I just, I wanted a to do something short and sweet, and something kind of a gimme to my readers, a feel good book because of the year we'd had,
Right.
and also wanted something to kind of boost my confidence to let me know that I could get a book out fast. And so I
Mhm.
kind of I took my four couples from the Game of the System series, and I had them all in this luxury mountain chalet where they were all on this ski vacation together. And I gave them each a little cute little storyline for each couple,
Okay.
and kind of did it like a kind of like Love Actually, that movie where they kind of cut
Yes.
between all the couples. So I
Mhm.
did it that way, and it was really fun because I was able to. I knew I wanted it to be about 60,000 words. I gave each couple like 12,000 words, and I just wrote each story separately. So I was
Oh.
able to actually get them out rather quickly. And then I took and kind of rearranged the chapters so that I could tell the story in a way that wouldn't be confusing.
Okay, that's a good idea. I mean, did readers love it? Because they often ask for things like that, and I do not deliver them.
Yes, they were really happy. The only snag I hit with that one was out of my control. I wanted it out, right around New Year's because it takes place on New Year's. It's Adam and Mia's first anniversary. They were married on New Year's Eve.
Mhm.
So I wanted it out kind of for that. And then I got COVID.
Oh.
Just random. We'd been so careful. I mean, in fact, I barely ever left home. It was my husband doing all of the shopping. He was the one going out and doing it, going out in the world. And he was super careful, always wearing gloves and everything. Not gloves, a mask, and
Mhm.
always using hand sanitizer and everything. And so, anyway, long story short, right around Thanksgiving, we all caught COVID, and so that put a snag in my plans. Fortunately, Amazon was understanding and let me move back my pre-order. But
Well, that's, I mean, legitimately, like, what are you
yeah,
gonna do?
exactly,
That's
exactly. So it was a little over a month late, but that's okay. They still ended up really, really liking it a lot. It was just a cute, feel good, low stakes story, but just some time you spent, you know how you read characters, you love them, you want to spend a little bit more time with them, and
Mhm, yes.
that was just kind of a gimme for my readers, and they seem to enjoy it a lot. So
It reminds me a little, I don't know, like Julia Quinn years ago used to talk about her second epilogue, which at the time was only available on her website. I have no idea now. But it was sort of that idea where you could give readers that here are 10,000 more words in that world.
yeah,
Um, and to give people that time. So I usually call it babies ever after, but
I
not
love
that there
that.
have to be babies, but just that sort of sense where people, because I get the emails, what happened to, and I am not the best at fulfilling that those
Mhm.
questions. So I'll just leave it there. Mainly because as an author, I'm not that interested in it. But that's
I
me.
totally get that because as an author, the higher the stakes the story, the better it is and the more exciting it is to write. But in order to
Yes,
raise the stakes, you kind of have to ruin the happily ever after you gave the characters. So to go
right.
back into that world, it seems almost like you have to ruin it.
Yes, you have to, you have to set it on fire in order to,
Right.
fix it again. And
Mhm.
that's hard. I mean, it's not how my brain works. So I'm going to ask you this because, okay, at some point in some time, I remember you emailed me with some research question, and I was like, "What? You're thinking about the book before you write it?" Like it just. This is before I took any Becca Syme class or anything, but it just blew my mind. I was like, "Wait, she's thought about it?" Like I don't, and that's not it. I'm a pantser. So basically, I just sit down every day and see what happens. And the idea that you had thought about it ahead of time, like I'm sure I emailed you this. I was like, What's going on in your head?" And you're like, "Well, I'm planning it out." I'm like, What does that mean?" Like I couldn't even conceive of what that meant. But you do research as well. Although now that I hear astronauts, that clearly would involve research, since what I know about
Yeah.
astronauts could fit in a thimble. Um, but what? Okay, you plot. I know you plot, right?
Well, I'm a little bit of a hybrid. I'm half plotter, half pantser. I mean, there's a certain point where I need to leave it open ended so that
Hmm.
when I sit down to write, I can bring in a lot of new, fresh, and exciting stuff. But yes, I need to have the backbone there in order for me to proceed. And one of the things, first of all, I have to say you were so helpful when I asked you all those questions. They were legal questions, and you have your background in law, and
Hmm.
especially in your specialty. I was writing the wedding book that I mentioned with my hero and heroine Adam and Mia. They were going to get married, and so I had to sit down and think, okay, first of all, I'd already put this couple through the ringer because I wrote a trilogy about them. And
Right.
as aforementioned, I gave them a happy for now at the end of the first book. And then I immediately took it away from them and tortured them for the next two books, right?
Right.
So I didn't want to do that again. But I wanted to be able to approach it from okay, I want them working together to overcome some kind of external issues. And I sat down and I thought, okay, what we have this young man. He's been extremely successful. He's kind of like a a young Zuckerberg. I mean,
Right.
not in any other way
Not in
besides he.
personality, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Not in any other way besides he had just had a lot of success at a very young age.
Right.
And so I wanted to know what would be the barriers, what would be the challenges to marrying someone like that. And one of the things that kind of turned me on to asking you more questions was I had read an article about Elon Musk, and it was actually written by his first wife, Justine
Oh,
Musk, and she had
okay.
talked a lot about when they first got married, she had to sign a postnup because his board of directors kind of forced the issue.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And
Okay.
so I thought, "Oh, that's an interesting conflict. What if the because I'd already written a book. My second hero, my secondary hero and heroine is the CFO of that same company.
Right.
And their whole book is about him taking the company public and him having to put out the fires of this scandal that he inadvertently had caused. It was a
Right.
sex tape that had gone viral that he was in, but nobody knew it was him. And so he's trying to keep that secret while also trying to take the company public, which was his lifelong dream. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, the company had gone public, and so I thought, okay, wouldn't this be interesting? What if the board of directors are saying you got to have this prenup before you get married, and he doesn't want to, and he's fighting it.
Mm-hmm.
So then I reached out to you because I knew about your legal specialties, and I knew you'd be perfect to ask these questions. And that's a wonderful thing I love about this community. We have so many smart, professional women
With such great
working.
backgrounds. I mean, it's amazing.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, I can throw a rock in the romance community, and I will hit a lawyer of some specialty
That's
or
true.
another, or even doctors, scientists. I mean, it's amazing how many smart women we have in our community.
Mhm.
It's really heartwarming. I feel like really one of the dummies compared to the rest of you. But
Yeah.
anyway, um, I knew so I asked you a bunch of questions and you gave me a ton more ideas. I don't know if you know this or not because I don't know how back and forth we went with it, but you gave me a ton of great ideas for additional conflicts. Like, for example, I wanted him to be fighting having to do the prenup because he doesn't like the message it sends to his soon to be wife that
Right.
he's kind of almost banking on getting divorced.
You're right.
Yeah, yeah, because so the book examined a lot of that. What does it mean to have a prenup? And you brought in a lot of great ideas about how the prenuptial agreement's supposed to
Oh,
protect both parties.
Hi, this is Amy Austin, and I'm back with Brenna Aubrey. For some reason unknown to me, the the internet crapped out, and it took a minute to get the download. I didn't want to miss anything that Brenna had said because to me it's actually quite fascinating. So before the the recording crapped out, we were discussing the whole prenuptial agreement and what the conflict that it had caused in the third book of that series.
Yeah, it was actually the fourth book. No worries. But I, as I was saying, before, it was their wedding book, and I kind of wanted to lower the stakes, but I wanted to have them working through uh, trust issues while facing this issue of a prenuptial agreement and him being overprotective, not wanting to exposure to that. So he's fighting the board of directors as so his conflict is he's fighting them. And anyway, in a long story short, it kind of ends up being a beautiful moment in the book when she finds out why he's so tense and worked up.
Hmm.
And she finds out that he's been trying to shield her from this. And she's like, of course I'll sign a prenuptial. It's fine. I totally get it. And so it was kind of almost this moment for him of maybe I don't need to be so hyper protective all the time of her. She is a strong woman. She can stand up for herself and that type of thing. So, yeah. So, I mean, the great thing is I went into this information gathering phase, which I do at the beginning of every book.
Hmm.
And when I was asking you all of these questions and gathering all of that info, you were giving me all these great ideas for different scenes. Like for example, the discovery phase where he has to divulge all his assets to her. I had some funny moments in that, and things like that that I hadn't considered because I didn't know that those were part of the process.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I helped. I don't remember. I just remember. Okay, so the my whole memory of it is she plans ahead. Like, that was that is what I got from it. I was like, how is she planning ahead? And I think that's what I asked you in the back and forth. I think I was just trying to figure out that you had thought
Yeah.
about a book before you started writing it.
Well, I think I don't know if it's exactly planning, Amy, or if it's just I have to gather a ton of info in order to figure out what the story is going to do. You know what I mean? So I need
Oh,
you know
okay.
what I mean? That's kind of what I was doing with you. I was asking you a bunch of questions in order to kind of ferret out what I could do as far as the story.
Okay, I'm gonna say that I understand. So I have a character. Well, I have many characters, and they all live in my head. It's kind of crowded in there. But I have one character who's unable to commit in this relationship or whatever. And I was driving because it's always driving or showering. I don't
Yes,
have
me
ideas
too.
other time, and it's always something I'm like, look, I have no hands to do write anything down.
Right, of course, it's always that way, and you have, like, this beautiful scene all composed in your head, and then you sit
and
down right like, almost immediately after, and you're, like, blanking out. I totally get it.
Oh,
Anyway, go
got it.
ahead.
And I'm always like on the 405 or some freeway where it's just too dangerous to even contemplate
Right.
something. And I think about it. So I have a character who can't commit, and I was driving, and I was thinking about what had happened to him. And in my head, I was like, oh, I think he was a victim of like the Catholic priest abuse scandal, but I know
Mhm,
nothing about that. So actually, I went online, and this is the thing you're talking about, the romance community. I sort of love. I just asked people, can you give me a bunch of resources to read about this? And people gave me a ton of stuff, and
mhm,
I like photocopied. I copy pasted everything, and then when I get a chance, because I'm packing, because I'm going to actually leave for the summer again. But when I get a chance, I'm going to read all about it, and that will inform the story because I don't know. I have insufficient information about that entire world to write a book.
mhm,
Um, but
and
once
somewhere in
I
that and somewhere in that research, you're gonna find ideas for scenes that you can use or
right,
backstory memories,
right.
things like that.
No, that's exactly how it happens. So basically, I read a lot about one topic, and
Mhm,
then it percolates. But there's for me, no planning. It's not like, well, on day one, he's going to do X, and on day two, chapter two, he's going to do Y. That I can't do without ruining what is the enjoyable part to me, which is finding out what happens.
right, and I'm right there with you, although recently, with my recent troubles of, creative blocks, I've gone to maybe, I give myself a skeleton plan,
Hmm.
and that really has helped me as far as drafting the first draft, is giving myself at least a little bit of a roadmap of where the story is going. And you know what, 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to follow that roadmap exactly, because when I
Right.
get down into the trenches of writing the scene, things will go different ways, and I'll have I could have them do this or
Mm.
whatever. But so I'm a little bit more of a planner, but I don't think I'm a classical planner
Right. I
in
mean,
the
there are some
sense that
people
I
who
like.
have outlines and like
Yes.
they write scenes out of order. That I struggle with. There's some author
Yeah,
who does that,
I
and she
can't
was
do
like,
that.
"Oh, it's Courtney Milan," and she writes scenes out of order, and she's like, "Oh, I write the best scene that comes to mind first," and I was like, "That's interesting. Um, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I just don't get it."
I mean, I
Um,
have scenes in mind ahead of time, but I cannot write them until I get to the point in the story that leads up to it, because who knows what dramatic build you've had in before that, you know what I mean?
mhm.
And unless I know the character and who they are at that point in the story, I mean, I did that once. My one of my very first books, I wrote the scenes like that, all out of order, and it ended up being such a huge mess and struggle for me. I was just like, there's no way, I have to write them linearly from now on.
This is so interesting because I think that I was having a conversation earlier today with an author, and I think that we all have that moment where you try a couple of things and it's so painful to put the book together that you
Mhm.
abandon it quickly. And one
Right.
of the pain points I had is I had a writing instructor when I first moved to California in 2001, and I was like trying to finish a book, and she was like, just have a messy first draft. And I did that, and it was the most painful thing I've ever had to fix in my life. And I would never, ever, no, I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. Like, it was just, it was so intellectually. It's actually it's a book called Judge, the one we were talking about a little bit
Uh-huh.
earlier. It took 8 drafts. I mean, that's a whole took many years to finish one book, and it was just so painful, that whole messy first draft. I did appreciate her idea that you just need to finish it, because I could rewrite the first chapters forever and ever and ever, but the messiness was just torture, and I will never write that way again. So I've perfected a method that, let me say this, is the least painful.
They're all painful, but yes, least painful is what we're going for when it comes to drafting, that's for sure.
Just the least painful, the most, like the little, the what I can tolerate pain wise on a daily basis is what I do writing wise. So I actually have a huge question for you about genre, because you write, well, you've written many things, but including historical, but you write new adult, and that, it didn't exist when I was a kid, and it became this huge sort of phenomenon. How do you feel about it now versus when you first started writing? Because I want to say, I just checked my Amazon, well, what do you call it, whatever you, I clicked on your books to see when I bought
Mhm.
them, and
Yeah,
it feels like I closed the tab now because of the problems we were having, but I feel like the first book I bought was 2013. Is that right?
that was my first book at any price,
Yeah,
and
okay.
that was marketed as new adult, which was doing really big at that point, and it
Mhm.
was, in my opinion, a much different genre than it's morphed into. I think it was definitely 2013, 2014 were the
Mhm.
boom years for,
Yes.
new adult, and then it started morphing into a lot of weird stuff. People were writing stepbrother books and calling them new adult, and they were
Oh,
writing
okay.
a lot of different, and then dark romance kind of sprung out of that in kind of as an offshoot,
Mhm.
and so I guess I don't even try to really market my books as new adult now, because I feel like what I write and what new adult is now is so different that I call them contemporary romance.
Right.
However, with the caveat of I write dual POV, and they're in each everything is in first person, so I'm writing first person from the heroine and the hero's point of view. So that's a little different, because I think in general contemporary romance is third person, or it traditionally has been, and I
Traditionally,
think
yeah.
that's morphing now. There's a lot of first person contemporary romance out there, so I feel like my books kind of fall more under the umbrella of contemporary romance, even though my all of my heroes and heroines for that series are in their
Mhm.
20s. For my astronaut series, they're in their 30s usually. So
Oh, so it's changed. Okay. That you answered all my like that's these are all the thoughts I've had, because so when I did look up and saw that I bought your first book in 2013, I had so many thoughts about my age. I was like, wow, time has passed. Like, to me
it
it does feel like it was only like 5 years ago, but that's not true. And okay, so there's also that. But I do remember that huge boom. So there was a huge boom with, I would call it angsty college romance in a lot of
yes,
cases,
yes.
and that is actually still my perception of new adult. But when you did talk about, I remember the stepbrother boom. I remember it so well. There was so many. It was so popular for
Hmm.
a moment. And then also the dark romance, a lot of kidnapped 20-year-olds.
Yes.
The heroes committed murder and the heroine witnessed it.
Hmm.
Um, and for me as a reader, that was something altogether different, because I was looking for more like the kind of books you wrote, or like Serena Bowen, and those kind of like college angsty romances. Like, that's because I like angst, and it seems like 20-year-olds have a lot of angst.
Yes.
So I really enjoyed that. But the spin-off, I didn't read the stepbrother romances because I didn't quite get it. I mean, it's cute, but I don't get it. And then the dark romance, it was hard for me. It was hard because it reminded me a little bit of the 70s and 80s with, well, did you kidnap her? And now you're gonna, and I was like, this
Yeah.
is like a Luke and Laura plot. I was like, I don't know. But how does it
Mhm.
feel to have then, well, because astronauts can't be 22. Well, I guess they could be, I don't know. But I didn't think about that. but it's a lot of education and training.
Yes, yes.
So how does it feel to write people in their 30s? Because actually, it's my favorite age. I mean, it's my favorite age to write, is 30 somethings.
It was nice to write people a little bit more established. Now, my heroine for the first, actually that series is a duet series, so all the stories are told in duet because I
Hmm.
tend to write long,
Hmm.
and I was writing those really long, especially those first two books because I was introducing this series. So I split them into two. I gave them a happy for now at the end of the first book, and then I kind of concluded the story. They have a different, thing now that they realize they're in love and they love each other. There's a different thing they have to face in the second book, and then they get their happily ever after. But the hero is like, she's still rather young. She's fresh out of college, but she has a PhD. So she's in late 20s and he's late 30s,
Hmm.
and he's got a lot of experience and backstory under his belt. It was very interesting to deal with a hero that had had more life experience
Hmm.
and had been out in the world and done things, especially someone as he was actually a Navy SEAL before he became an astronaut. And that follows a lot of precedent. There are a couple of astronauts who started out as Navy SEALs. This is
Hmm.
kind of my segue into the military romance genre. I kind of wanted to write in that
Wow. Okay.
genre, but I thought, well, I'll do it a little different. I'll put my geeky spin on it and I'll make them astronauts,
Right.
even though they're still in the military. So that's kind of how I was going about that series. But of course, because of all of that, they have to have this body of experience that made them older, and it was nice to explore that because in your 30s you've had these life experiences, but now is the time where you're like, okay, enough is enough goofing around. I want,
Right.
and that was my character's deep desire, my hero's deep desire, is he wanted a family. He wanted to belong. He wanted to settle down, even though he'd been this crazy womanizer and he's going through some trauma because he lost his best friend. I wrote
Hmm.
that in the very first chapter where his best friend dies, and he feels very responsible for it.
Right.
And so he's had this trauma, but he's soothing it in so many unhealthy ways. But deep down, his
So.
greatest desire is he wants to, settle down and have a family, and but he feels like he doesn't deserve it because of, he left his friend behind, and
Hmm.
his friend did have a family, and
Right.
so he feels like he doesn't deserve that, even though that's what he wants. So he's solving that issue in whereas it's always hard for me in the Gaming the System series with the younger heroes and heroines,
Hmm.
to write the happily ever after at their young
At the,
age.
right.
Even though they found love, I don't ever really tie it up with them getting married.
Right.
It's just, okay, we found love, we love each other, we're going to be together, and that's usually how I end it. And I know a lot of my readers are like, where's the epilogue? But I don't feel like I can write the epilogue. I kind of have to, in my mind, have them age up a little before they find that
Hmm.
place where they can get to. Um, and I don't
No.
know, maybe it's my own. I got married in my late 20s, so I didn't get my happily ever after until I was a little older either. So I don't know, maybe that's part of it.
Okay, so I'm back on with Brenna Aubrey. Don't don't ask what happened. Maybe I'll explain later. But one of the things that you hit upon with the happy for now and new adult is the fundamental problem I sometimes have with new adult. So there's two issues. One is, author Maggie Marr.
Hmm.
Um, a few weeks ago, she recommended I read a book called The Teenage Brain, and it's this fascinating sort of look at why people like 25 and under make the kind of decisions they do, which, to an older person look just insane. But it's a lot of the brain not being fully formed until we're in our mid 20s. So I get that difficulty in having characters make these lifelong decisions before they are fully mature, I guess would be fair enough. But that's
Exactly.
also, yeah, it's also one of the hardest things I sometimes have with new adult, because part of me sometimes wants to shake the characters and go,
Yes.
oh my God, in 10 years, this is not going to be a problem.
Yes. It's true that it's almost a dual-edged sword in that age group is fun to write about because everything is so intense,
It
But on
is,
the
yes.
other hand, everything is so intense that
Tense.
you know what I mean? So I totally get what you're saying.
That's exactly that encapsulates it exactly. So I read it because the intensity is so high. I mean, when you're flooded with like hormones and you have more time than I do, then
Mhm.
you can like really like delve down deeply into all those feelings. But in the alternative, from up here, at this top level now at my age, I'm like,
Mhm. Yeah, kinda over the whole kid thing. It's so immature, blah, 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 and I definitely, as I wrote the series, my stories progressively became a little bit more mature as I was kind of backing away from that. So I had Adam and Mia that were kind of in the thick of things, and everything was so tumultuous with them. And as I progressed with my couples, even though they're around the same age, I don't know, maybe it was my own impatience with it. Maybe it was the fact that I was changing a little bit how I was marketing the books because I felt like I wasn't really writing traditional classic new adult at that point,
right.
that I kind of was transitioning my books into being more contemporary, that, that I shifted because of that. I don't know. I can't tell you. It's probably both.
But yes, and so, but I think one of the things actually from this podcast I've learned is that authors grow and change, and whether readers come along is a whole different conversation. But we all mature as
Hmm.
writers, and sometimes as artists shift what we're doing from what we did in the beginning, because you're not the same person that you were in 2012 or 2013.
Exactly.
So
It's so
things.
true. And your writing changes and progresses, and the things that interest you and kind of set you on fire are different too, I think.
Yes, and so it's interesting to watch authors progress. There's some authors I read every single book, and sometimes I like the progression. I'm like, oh, she's delved more into X or she's delved more into Y. But then I sometimes read reviews after I read a book, and a lot of readers are like, but I just want the thing I got in book one, and she's now in
Yeah.
book 15. And I get both. I get both. So either, and I think there's other authors who can serve both. I think there's some authors who are very able to consistently, masterfully give a similar experience time and again. And there are other authors who give a different experience, not unsatisfying in any way, but not the same.
It,
And
it's
I,
it, it's a delicate balance. Another one of those delicate balances, as we say, because I read an interesting post in an author group talking almost exactly about what you just mentioned about how readers say they want the same thing, and a lot of times readers will come back to you and say, "I want more from this couple," and we as authors interpret that as, "Oh, we've got to write more sequels because everybody's pounding down the door for sequels,"
right.
or what they're really saying is, "I want more of the feeling I got when I read this couple."
Yes. So the person who Jen LeBlanc, she really
Yeah,
solidified that for me. We were talking about it one day just randomly, and she was like, "They're not saying they want the same book." She's like, "They're saying they want the same experience,"
yeah.
and I was like, "Oh," like it was a super helpful moment to realize they wanted the same emotional experience, not more of Amy and Joe or whoever it is.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
So
that's
do you
very wise advice.
I had to reach out to someone for it. As you were saying, the romance community is full of people who can give you the information if
Yes.
you ask. So, are you now seeking to write a similar experience now that you?
Yes, actually, I've I've brainstormed up a new series idea that I want to do that's kind of a spin-off from gaming system. I kind of want to kind of put an end cap on that. Maybe not a permanent end cap, but
Mhm.
I would like to move on from my first series. It's very, very successful, and I'm very, very happy with it. But there's only so far I can go with those characters,
Right.
and I'd like to turn my attention to something new. So I'm kind of laying the groundwork now. As I write these last few books in the Gaming the System series, I'm laying the groundwork for kind of a spin-off trilogy that I want to write. And exactly that, I kind of sat down and said, okay, what is it that when I get response from readers, when I
Hmm.
get emails and reviews and whatever, what is it? What is the common denominator? What are they connecting with? And so I'm kind of drafting it with two things in mind. Number one, I have a couple germs of ideas, like with the trope I want to go with,
Right.
that I came up with on my own, but I'm molding it to what I think the readers are wanting from me too.
Okay. That's yes. See, that's so smart. I should do
Well, thank
these.
you.
I no, I'm really learning that there's more. I perhaps one can put more thought into it going forward because up until now I've just been writing the books I want to write
Uh-huh.
without a lot of thought at all. And even in 2020, it was such an epiphany to write subsequent books in the same series. Like I usually just hop around based on how I thought, and then readers just have to wait. And I realized that that is not necessarily a smart way to go forward. Let's just say that.
Well,
So
I think we learn a lot subconsciously too, and I think when you say you didn't think things through, I think you did. You just weren't consciously aware of it.
that's true. That is true. It was, so much of our lives are lived in our subconscious, and that's one of the difficult parts. Let's just say that.
Right.
Um, so, can I ask you this? And this is something I've always wondered: what you had a lot of success very early in the writing career. I know you wrote books before that because I know, but what? How did that affect what you were writing going forward? Because sometimes people, I don't want to say seem trapped by success because that is so not fair, but when you're really successful at something, you feel the compulsion to do more of that.
That's a really interesting question. I've never been asked that before, and it's something that I've wrestled with over the years. In fact, that's a little bit what caused my blockage there when I talked about that earlier in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did have a lot of success earlier on, and my first book came out with quite a lot of notoriety for good and bad. I
Right.
blogged about my process towards publication. Self-publishing was still rather new, and people were still finding their footing within it, and a lot of and it was just starting to be a respected path to
Mm-hmm.
publishing.
Yes.
And I had blogged about my process of turning down a traditional deal in order to do it my own way, and that kind of it went viral, and all of that kind of wound out together with that being said. I had a really, really marketable book, so it was kind of a perfect storm, and it caused a lot of buzz around
Mm-hmm.
my books and my series, and then
It was huge. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, it was huge. It was the thing that people were talking about at the
yeah,
time,
a lot of
all the
people.
time. I'm
It's
not gonna
true.
lie.
And I will still have people come up and say, "Oh, are you the same person that did that blog?"
Yeah.
But it was great, but it was also it kind of set me on this path. I don't want to say I felt entitled, but like when I spun off and did a different series and I didn't get the kind of response that I did with my first one, because it was a brand new series, a brand new genre. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of went into it stupidly thinking, oh, my readers will jump right on to this one too. So I'll have that and then I'll get some new readers. And without any awareness of the fact that a lot of readers have very, very strong series loyalty.
They do,
Um,
and very
you know,
niche too. Yeah.
exactly. So it isn't just about being author loyal, but sometimes they're also within the author, they're only going to read certain series. And so it was kind of this weird thing where I released these other books to they actually did well, com- but compared to my other ones, it was crickets
Right.
compared to gaming the system, and that kind of messed with me a lot because I thought, well, and I don't. It took me a little time to realize what it's all about and not take it personally, not feel like I peaked because there
Mm-hmm.
was a bit of that too. Am I just going to be this one hit wonder type thing?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so much.
So yeah, exactly. So there was a lot of questions in there about how do I proceed, and then there was a lot of expectations for this next gaming the system book. So the more that people were bugging me, and at that point I'd also translated into different languages, so
Mm-hmm.
the books were taking off in the other languages too, and I was getting a lot of pressure from all these different places to write this next book. And so then it became, oh, I don't want to disappoint them. And so, I say a lot, writing is a head game, and that definitely was a head game. I actually am very, very fortunate, and a lot of the things that helped launch gaming the system and
Mm-hmm.
make it such a huge sensation were almost a product of its time. The
Yes.
fact that New Adult was doing so well, the fact that uh, self-publishing was just taking off and becoming a
Mm-hmm.
respected thing, and that I blogged about my process and decided to be open about it. All of these things were things that are not repeatable now, obviously.
Yes.
So,
I mean, that's the
yeah,
definition of zeitgeist, I think.
yes,
I mean, it will, I mean, it is, it's a confluence of events that are not necessarily repeatable.
hmm,
And
exactly.
it is what it is. And it's something that you're hitting on something that authors, I mean, we all talk about this. So we write a lot of books, but we're all us. Like it's like every book I've written is me.
Hmm.
And so sometimes when readers are like, but I want more of X, but I don't want more of Y. And I keep thinking, but they're all parts of me.
Yeah.
But I think I learned not to take it seriously. I went to an author event years and years ago in Texas where there's a lot of romance readers, and at that point I think I realized that readers were much more niche readers than I had ever been. So
Hmm.
there were some people like, well, I only like motorcycle romance, and I thought, oh, okay. And so and they would say, I was like, okay, so they're like, so I'm not going to buy your book, and I was like, okay. And I used to take that personally. I'm like, well, if you just tried it, but it's fine. If they only like motorcycle romance, that is absolutely fine. And I need to not market to them and not spend any time trying to market to them. Um,
That is so wise, and I do want to say too, it takes a certain maturity level to hit when you can say, okay, I can't take this personally, because I totally get you there. I've also uh, that was a hard one lesson for me as well, not taking it personally when you want to zig and your writers or your readers want you to zag. You know what
Zach,
I mean?
yes. Yes, and so look, I'm not going to say it didn't involve lots of wine and maybe food,
Right.
um, and like especially like 2012, 2013, 2014, when I thought readers should like everything equally. Not that I like them equally myself, but I wanted them to buy everything equally, I guess is what I want to say. And so
Hmm.
I had one book that did really well in 2014, and the subsequent book no one liked. And I was like, what? And actually, I got a horrible review on Dear Author, the subsequent book as well.
Oh,
And I
geez.
was like, I think it may have gotten a D. I don't know. I remember Beth Yarnell texted me, and I was picking my son up from preschool, and she's like, "I'm just telling you now," and I was like, "Okay," you
Those
know.
smart, those smart. But for what it's worth, they don't. Your author never sold any books for me either, and I got a bad review from them too. So,
Yeah, I know.
um,
So, and that subsequently went its own way. But it's just it was a hard lesson to learn. I mean, I would sit in my office and I'm like, I'm gonna have this wine and I'm gonna just cry and be sad. And it was only years later did I not take it personally. And but it was also a huge lesson. I don't know if you've thought about this. I'm sure you have. That I think I don't know who said this. Maybe it was Sky Warren. She was like, you need to stop marketing the books that don't sell as well. And that was the hardest lesson because what I wanted to do is put all my marketing dollars in books that didn't sell just so they could sell as well as the books that did sell well.
it's well, I mean, it's that it goes back to that analysis, that analogy of books being your children, and you don't want to have favorites, right?
Right.
I
No,
totally
these
get
are my babies, right? Yeah.
it. I get it, and it's true that once you've written the book, you have to divorce yourself from that and go, okay, they're a product. This is a product. It's
I
not
know.
me. It's not a slice of me, even though we have channeled facets of ourselves. And as human beings, we are very complex and we have very, very many flat facets. And that's why you can write a darker, more angsty thing over here, but a funnier, lighter thing over here, because you're both of those things.
Right.
Yeah, but obviously the readers are only going to connect with one or the other, and they don't want to try the other. I don't know whether it's because they have a more two-dimensional view of who their author is, or just that
I
they
think,
go ahead.
yeah, I think that may be it though, because I think that I don't know if you went to the last Ram maybe, and there was one author who talked about just she every time she wrote a different genre, she got a new pen name.
Yep.
And I was like, "Huh?" And she was like, "Well, that way people can have the cowboy and they want the cowboy and that author is cowboys. And if they want I forget what her other thing was. If they want the other thing, then they get this author who is the other thing." And I thought it was sort of brilliant because she had learned faster to divorce herself from that.
That is really cool. The only drawback to that is just the sheer energy it takes to maintain multiple pen names.
No, it's at the beginning of 2020 I had 4 pen names. I now have 2. um, because
Now,
it
do you
was
still write those books that you wrote in those other two and you just kind of merge them, or did you just kind of orphan those other two pen names?
they are orphans and they will never speak again. And it was
Mm-hmm.
okay because it was too much. I didn't okay,
Yes.
having a couple pen names seems cute in the beginning, but when you're like 20 books deep, the work becomes slightly overwhelming. Or at least for me, it became slightly overwhelming.
Oh, yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm actually I did put out that one historical that I wrote a million years ago in another
Mhm.
pen name, but again, total orphan. She's just out there in KU. I run a book bub on her every so often. She has a website and a newsletter that I do nothing with, and that's it. That's all I do. But yeah, going forward, I think having tightly branded pen names is actually really cool if you don't feel like you need to do all of the social media support for those.
Right. Yes.
That's the thing
So
that really daunts me. I can barely do my own social media for my one pen name.
no, and it's overwhelming. And so people are savvier or they have better time hacks or they don't get sucked down a well or whatever. I mean, I log into Facebook and like it'll be 3 hours later, so I don't do it because I can't manage my time, to be
Mhm,
frank. I
mhm.
think we once years ago we talked about like all the like blocks that you have to put on your computer
Yes.
in order to just get work done. And I still have them all. I mean, I'm not kidding. And so that's it it takes a certain level of savvy, but I think the longer any of us write and a lot of us, who self-publish realize what the limitations are and what the road has to be going forward.
Mhm, mhm.
Very much so.
It's all a learning game. Even here, what are we, about 10 years on into this? I think uh Amazon first offered Kindle in 2009, but I think people really started really picking up speed with self-publishing around 2011. So we're about end
Right.
of the first decade of this
Right.
new era of authors being their own publishers and being business people along with being creative.
Mhm.
And so we're still learning these lessons and sharing them, and obviously learn them much earlier than the others.
It took so long. Like sometimes I'm like, why did it take so long? And then sometimes I think, oh, it's okay. Like it's just okay because there's no way I can go back. Because some of the mistakes I made in 2012, 2013, not great.
Yeah. Yeah,
They're just
but the biggest mistake is to not learn from your mistakes. And obviously you have. So, I mean,
yeah, yeah. You can't get bogged down with it. So what is it that? Well, I have okay many questions. What is the? Let me go back. What started your interest in romance?
oh gosh, my interest in romance started, it started when I was in my teens and I was picking up Harlequins from we go to visit my aunt up in Canada every other year. Or actually, my grandma, all my family's up there. I'm half Canadian. My mom's from Canada,
Mhm.
and we go up there every other year. And for part of the time, we were up there for like a month. But for part of the time, I'd stay with my elderly aunt. She was the sweetest lady, absolutely
Mhm.
sweetest lady. But she loved Harlequins, and she'd always have a big box by her big easy chair of all the Harlequins. There were always Harlequin presents. And so of course
Oh, okay.
I'd start
Mm.
pouring through those. I was like 15, 16, 17 years old, reading these hilarious well, I mean,
Mhm.
just hilarious in that they've changed. Romance has changed a lot, but back in the day,
So much.
but we're talking the 80s and it was very different back then. Anyway,
Yes.
so I loved it, but then I kind of gradually progressed out of it for reading, and when it went more sci-fi fantasy direction. And actually, when I started writing, really feeling the compulsion to write was when was fantasy. I was playing Dungeons and Dragons a lot with my group of friends, which my husband and I both belong to. And I had this really cool idea for one of my characters, and I sat down to kind of write her backstory, and it ended up becoming more novelized. And
Mm-hmm.
then I was writing and writing and writing it, and I'd come home from work every day. I was a teacher during the day, and I'd
Mm-hmm.
come home, and we were newlyweds. We didn't have a lot of money, didn't have a lot um, of time to go out. My husband was working like 70-hour weeks, so I was home in the afternoons a lot by myself, before kids and everything. And I'd
Mm-hmm.
come home and I'd be so motivated to write because I wanted to know what happened in the story. I mean, I didn't know, so kind of much more pantsing back then. And so I'm writing and writing and writing, and then I started sharing it with my friends, and a lot of people were saying, this is actually really good. You should try and get it published. And then back then, of course, the whole idea of getting something published was huge. I mean, like, I don't
Yes.
know. I internet was still young then, and I do a little searching, and it looked really, really daunting. And then I thought, well, at least I should try and get some fictional, critiques. So I
Mm-hmm.
started to try and join some online critiques, and I wanted some local ones. And I reached out to one local one, and the person who ran that, her name is Jacqueline Diamond. I'm sure
Oh,
she'll
Jackie
know you.
Dime. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And she was the sweetest lady. She said, our group is full, but I highly recommend Romance Writers of America. There's a chapter in Orange County. And that's when I joined RWA. And it's all because of Jackie, which was so sweet. She answered my random email, and I actually got to meet her in person.
Mhm.
Sweetest lady ever. And I really, really enjoyed that OCC chapters because we were back then. It was rather a large chapter. There was multi-published authors sitting at the same table as you, New York Times bestsellers. I made some really great friends, including you and Beth and Maggie and other
Mhm.
people that you've mentioned in the podcast.
Right.
And as I kept going to these meetings, I saw I wanted to pick up the books of the people that I knew, so I started reading their books, and I fell back in love with the romance genre.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's when I
Right.
decided, oh, I want to try my hand at writing a romance, and I found it was really actually tough. And it really makes me mad when
It
people talk
is.
about how easy it is to write a romance, and I'm like, are you kidding? You're writing two arcs instead of one.
Right.
You're writing two character arcs, and you have to have somewhere in there where you're writing their attraction and falling in love with each other, but you're also having them help. They have to find a point where they're overcoming what it is that prevented them from finding love
Funny.
before.
Right.
You know what I mean? You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean, because you
Yeah.
write the genre
Yes.
as well. So yeah, so it was very intriguing. It was really helping me grow as an author, and that was my whole journey to back to romance from where it started, picking up those Harlequin Presents back in the day.
So many of us did that. I always wonder if my grandmother had had different tastes, would I have just gone a different direction? You know, like, but I, but I can't
That's
know.
funny. Yeah, that's hilarious. You have a similar story to mine. I guess many of us do, picking up our parents or aunts or whoever's books.
Exactly, but I was like, what if she didn't like the little punishing kisses books? Like, what if she had read a completely different set? Would I have just been a different person? But I can't change it. And I actually have all those books now. I found them, or when she died, I took a lot of them, and it's just they're on my shelf because it's the formative stuff.
Yes, that's so cool. I wish I'd kept a few of those. That would have been so cool to have, so you could thumb through them and go, oh, I remember when I read this, and I was only, I was thinking about this or whatever. Or especially
Mhm.
when back then you're young, you actually don't know how love works or
No,
relationships or anything, so you're almost reading them to teach you, which is another daunting thing about writing romance. Is you want to present romance, the relationship, at least towards the end, in a happy and healthy way, so that
right.
other people, when they're reading this, they know, okay, these are the standards that I should look for in my own relationships.
Yes. Well, I wish I'd learned more of that, but that's a different conversation. What I just did another podcast about that, where I was not the host. But I guess the other question is, do you find that you're telling like a bigger story? A few months ago, sorry, 2020, somebody asked me what bigger story I was trying to tell. And I had to get off. We were Zooming and I got off the Zoom and I was like, what is she asking me? What does that mean? I never thought about it. But I sat down because I have all the time in 2020 and sort of had a longer thought about what some of the overarching themes were in my books. Have you found that there are some themes that you come back to inadvertently or maybe on purpose across your books?
I you're absolutely right. I've never thought about it in the terms of in those terms before, which is really cool. The what bigger story are you trying to tell? Because I have thought about things, themes that I gravitate to a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but I haven't thought about it in terms of what is that big story you're trying to tell. That's really interesting, and probably now you've spurred a lot of future thought from me going forward, much like you did. A lot of
Yeah.
reflecting. I guess that you probably have high intellection, like
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. In fact, a lot of what you discuss sounds a lot like me. I'm a number three intellection. I don't know what yours is, but I'm sure it's pretty up there. It sounds like
Mm-hmm.
it. But so being the reflective person I am, I was thinking about this a while back and how I tend to gravitate towards um, stories about family, about how family can be your biggest asset, but also your biggest detriment, how it can
Mm-hmm.
also hold you back, the things that happen to you as a family, and the way you learn how to deal with the world in your first relationship unit, which is usually your family,
Mm-hmm.
and how that can either boost you forward or hold you back as you
Mm-hmm.
move into adulthood or as you move about in the world as an adult, and how we don't know always consciously, um, you know, realize or assimilate that. So family is a big one. Addiction is one that I go back to a lot in my books, and it's really odd because I don't know I I'm not related to anyone who was an alcoholic or know a lot of people who had drug use issues or whatever, but for some
Mm-hmm.
reason I gravitate a lot back to that. It's not usually with my characters, but it's usually my characters having to deal with that with someone they loved, having had an addiction, and either and what that has done for them. So that's one. Health, sometimes I'll have health issues in my books. I think that's because of my own personal health
Mm-hmm.
issues, maybe a little bit of reflective, my own physical issues with that. I don't know. I haven't really thought. I mean, I'm on the process of trying to think about that a little deeper, about why do I keep gravitating to these certain issues? Are they just really deep sources of conflict that are easy for me to kind of pull things from, or
Mm-hmm.
is there something deeper there psychologically? I don't know. I guess
It's
we'd have to
interesting.
kind of
Yeah.
go ahead.
Because my no because my therapist once asked me something about this, and she was like, she okay, my therapist is an odd duck, but all 90% of her clients are writers because that's what she likes, so whatever. But one of the things that she has talked about is that writers are often working through things, but they're not conscious of them working through it while they're writing.
That's so interesting to me. That is
I think
fascinating.
so. Yeah, she said it's really fascinating. And I think she represents a lot of, not represents, sorry, she's not an agent. She has a lot of TV writer clients. And so it only upon reflection do people realize that they're like, hitting that, beating that horse over and over again because they're trying to work it out in their head. And the addiction thing is really interesting because you'd have to think about, not you don't have to, but I would think about like, what is it about addiction?
Hmm.
Compulsion or redemption or whatever the thing
Yeah.
would be that represents, if it's not on the nose addiction.
Uh-huh.
But that's super interesting because I think that I often wonder if I read an author's entire body of work, other than like Pat Conroy, who I think is a little more upfront, would
Yeah.
it like be clear that these 5 issues, 2 issues are sort of touchstones in their life that they come back to again and again because it's the thing that they're wrestling with or that intrigues them or that they've experienced.
I think you've definitely got something there as far as, and I'd love to see someone with a deep background in psychology, maybe even write a book about that, about creatives in general and how they feel compelled. You know how they have that cliche about psychologists, the people who study psychology in college and whatever are people who have their own issues they need to work out or whatever. I
Yes.
almost wonder if that, as you say, that people who are gravitate towards certain things in their creativity are doing the same thing, but just using a different medium.
Yeah, I do. I just
Right.
it's a thing I wonder, and I don't know, and I have insufficient background to ask. But the more podcasts I do, and the more women creatives I talk to, I because somebody asked me the question, I think I'm starting to think more about careers being like an overarching sort of thing, and also hitting on themes or whatever it is, often in an overarching way. And which may play into that whole experience idea, you know. So if I'm going to read your books, I'm going to get A, experience, because for whatever reason, that's what you create. And if I read
Mhm.
author B, I'm going to get something different. And they're each unique, which is what I love about books. So even in romance, there are sharp differences
Yeah,
among.
such a huge variety. It's really amazing.
So I'm going to ask you, what is coming out next?
I am writing two more books in my another duet in my astronaut series next.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm working on right now. I'm also doing some co-writing projects under various pen names with other authors for the new Kindle Vella platform. So, I'll
Yeah.
report back on that. That's all
It
brand new. But the
is.
exciting thing is that it's kind of allowing you to write and publish in, as you write a little bit, a lot like what I'm doing with I do a serial with my
Yeah.
newsletter. It's
Yes.
a prequel, so it's
Mm-hmm.
going back into my previous characters that they know and kind of showing them before the before the beginning of the series.
That's such a great
So that's
idea. That's so amazingly brilliant. Yes, I
well,
love that.
it's a way to keep the readers engaged and give them a little bit of new content and keeping them opening your newsletters when I'm not a fast publisher, so I kind
Mm,
of want to keep them engaged and wanting to open the newsletters while I'm working on my books. So
okay. That is so cool. So I'm so glad that you survived COVID and 2020. Um,
I am
well,
so
no,
glad you did the same.
it's been so hard.
It is.
I'm actually traveling, so I will not see anyone. But hopefully, I will see you in the fall. I mean, I don't know. I'm going to leave in a couple of weeks because I can finally leave again.
Uh-huh.
And so I bought tickets. I'm just so excited about the prospect because I haven't been on a plane in like 18 months or
Are
something.
you going to Europe?
Yes,
Awesome! How exciting!
but
Oh my
only in like a couple weeks. So, well, I had to wait to make sure I could go, you know. So
right.
now that I know that I can go, I bought tickets and I'm going to leave kind of immediately, and then I won't be back for a while because it's been so long. Like I feel like so many things have fallen to the wayside, like business wise, that I took care of on a semi regular basis, and I need to sort of shore up everything.
Yes.
Everything. And that's a list. I made a list this morning. But so maybe in the fall I will see you again. And I assume that California will be much more open. Sometimes it looks kind of normal when I go out, and then sometimes I'm like, not yet.
Yeah,
to be frank, because
exactly. But yeah, crossing fingers. I mean, I think everybody is kind of over it, and especially the people who've been vaccinated are ready to kind of move on. And okay, I've done my part. Now let's get out there and do things.
exactly,
Right?
exactly. So much that, so
Yes.
much that. I mean, I get it. I mean, I went to the beach. So I've been biking at the beach in the morning because I can't go to the gym. And I used to go spinning, and so I've been biking at the beach. And about
Oh,
two
how
weeks
cool.
ago, at 7:30 in the morning, it was full,
Oh,
and
wow.
I was like, oh, people are done. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, nice to know.
Uh-huh.
So it's been interesting, but I can only, well, I have great hope going forward that it's going to be much better, because I think that we're social animals, and without that, it's been hard.
Yeah. Yes, it has. The pandemic for me wasn't all bad. I actually discovered a lot of stuff about myself that I probably wouldn't have if it hadn't have been forced on me, and a
Hmm.
lot of things about my family unit and being confined with just my family in this house and those type of things, and finding ways to cope and enjoy life in ways that I never thought I could.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, yeah, I think we're all over it, and I've got a kid about to graduate and go across the country to college, so I'm dealing with all of that now, and that emotional turmoil and stuff. So
Yeah, no, I have a couple of those friends, and it's hard because yes, they're always going to go away, but now you've been with them in a way that you would
yeah,
never have been with a teenager. And then
yeah,
suddenly they're like, I'm out of here.
yeah, yeah.
So that's its own thing. I have an 11-year-old, and he still loves me and wants to
Oh,
spend all this time with me.
still a fun
So
age.
so I have a few more years before he forgets who I am. And it just comes to me for money and food. Uh,
Yes, yes. I am told it gets better once they hit their 20s, but yeah, for right now, it's a little tough.
yeah,
You
there's
just
a
keep
space
thinking
in
I'm
there where
like,
you're like, well, I
yeah,
love you and I gave birth to you, but who are you?
yes, yes. I'm kind of at that point right now.
No, I'm going to be, can I just tell you, I'm sort of love it in the sense that like when I visit my friends, their teenagers are delightful to me and then will turn around and be awful to their parents.
Yes,
And I always look at them, I go, well, they're clearly you raised a delightful, like soon to be adult because they've been lovely to me. And so you just have to know that they go out into the world and they're just lovely to everybody. But when they come home, well, whatever.
that's a good way to look at it. I think they're just kind of over their parents at some point. And I remember when I was that age too. It's just again hard not to take it personally.
Yes. So since I'm not there, I'm not taking it personally. But I just think one of my friend's daughters emailed me asking me for advice about a resume or something, and she was just so delightful. And her mother like was texting me going, "This kid." So it's just two sides, and it's well, for her it's not fun to watch. For me, it's somewhat enjoyable because her daughter really is delightful, except at home.
Yes, I think that's universal.
Yes. So thank you so much for talking to me, even with the technical whatever. Sorry about all of that.
Yeah, I think
But
that was my fault, but thank you for having me, Amy. It's been lovely having this chat. I just very stimulating conversation.
no, it's so great. And I can't wait till I can see you in person again because it's been apparently a really long
Yes,
time.
I owe you many hugs.
Oh my God, so many.
Yeah.
But thank you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been great. Take care.
You too. This has been A Time to Thrill with me, your host, author Aime Austin. If you enjoyed it, I hope you'll share, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. It will help others to find and listen to my conversations with brilliant creators. Also, please hit the subscribe button on your podcast app. In addition to hosting this podcast, I'm also the author of the Casey Court series of legal thrillers. They're available wherever books are sold, your local library, and also an audiobook. You can follow me on Instagram at ThrillerPod, find me on Facebook at Casey Court Series or A Time to Thrill. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with you soon with more great conversation.